Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight to speak to all of you. I am daunted by the presence of so many esteemed members of our community here tonight. Not only people who I admire and love and care about, but many colleagues who helped me very concretely when I was putting my book together. And so thank you. This is a wonderful thing to be part of tonight. Okay, here comes the keynote speech. When I was small, my grandfather, Mirgadich, would regale me with stories from the old country, and he would boast about being Armenian. He told me I was smart because I was Armenian. He told me I was going to go to college and be a doctor someday because I was Armenian. He told me that there were many famous Armenians in history. Saint Vartan, William Soroyan, Cary Grant. Mark is looking into the Cary Grant lineage for me, checking on that. Mirgadich told me that after the flood, Noah's Ark landed on Mount Ararat in Armenia, and so everyone in the world was Armenian. He told me that we Armenians suffered and survived, and then we would trot out into the backyard and he would stoke up the barbecue and roast the most delicious shish kebab, while my grandma Lucy rolled out chereg and layered baklava in her kitchen. All very special foods that were, I was informed, Armenian. When I was small, I went to weddings where Armenian music was played and everyone danced in a big circle. I attended Armenian church services. I was even an altar boy. I attended Armenian Sunday school, where I learned about the apostles Thaddeus and Bartholomew and Saint Sahag and Mesro. I grew up knowing I was Armenian. But what is an Armenian? Obviously, an Armenian is someone who lives in the Republic of Armenia, or was born in the Republic of Armenia, right? But not everyone who calls themselves Armenian was born in Armenia or even has roots there. So maybe we should just say that an Armenian is someone who speaks the language Armenian. Of course, there's a complication there too, since there are deep variations in what we call the Armenian language, but never mind about that. What about a person who doesn't speak any Armenian at all, but has parents or grandparents who call themselves Armenian? What about people like myself, whose grandparents emigrated from the Ottoman Empire in the late 1800s or early 20th century? People whose ancestors hail from the Armenian provinces in the eastern part of what most people today call the Republic of Turkey and what many Armenians call Western Armenia. What about someone like myself who doesn't speak Armenian, whose family doesn't come from the Caucasus? Am I Armenian? The easy answer is that a person who identifies as Armenian is Armenian. Because of course, in one of the tragic twists of history, identification is a big part of what it means to be an Armenian. In the Ottoman Empire, Armenians were marked as Christians and persecuted and murdered because of their identity. Every single Armenian in the world is related to people who suffered or died at the hands of the Turks. But not only the Turks, but the Arabs and the Mongols also raided Armenian lands. Kurds attacked Armenians. The Persians, too, fought Armenians because they practiced a different religion. And so over the centuries, it took guts to preserve this identity known as Armenian. Finally, during World War I, over 1 million people died for this identity. Vast regions, including where all of my grandparents come from, were emptied of Armenians. In brief, we are people marked in blood. It is history. It is who we are. So it is obvious why identity is so important to Armenians. Historically, this identity is based in religion and language. However, because of the ever-shifting communities over the centuries, we actually don't know how many people today who identify themselves as Muslim Turks or Kurds may have ancestors who were Christian Armenians. We just cannot know this. the notion of pure blood is fictional. In the end, the lineage of our heritage is not merely a matter of genes or geopolitical borders. Our heritage is a heritage of culture and identity based in honor, self-respect, and dignity. In other words, pride. For many, if not most Armenians, pride is based in religion. The first thing an Armenian will tell you about his people is that they were the first Christians. And for centuries, Christianity was the defining element for the Armenian people. But it is not the only thing that has distinguished the Armenians over the years. In the time of the Ottoman Empire, the Armenians, living as a subject ethnic group under Sharia law, established themselves as an intelligent and hardworking millet. When I first got to New York in 1976, I landed a job on Wall Street. And when the guy gave me the job, he said, "I know you're going to work hard. You're an Armenian." But there are plenty of other people in the world who share the distinguishing characteristics of Armenians. We are not the only people who are smart or industrious or clever or brave. We cannot claim these traits as definitive. So for many, language is what makes an Armenian. But let's put a pin in that for now. And like I mentioned earlier, if you call yourself Armenian, maybe your ancestors hail from a place that once boasted a large Armenian population, particularly in the Ottoman Empire. Maybe they came from Erzurum, or Van, or Zaytun. Maybe like me, you are a Harpatsi, or a Digramitsi. In this way, region defines what is or isn't an Armenian. But then what about food, music, poetry, art, architecture? All those beautiful palaces in Istanbul and elsewhere in Turkey, designed by the great Armenian Sinan, medieval poetry, the intense compositions of Komitas. I am here today to say that despite the fact that the Armenian nation has survived massacre and genocide over the centuries, that is not the optimal way to define who we are. Certainly, even though we have made great efforts to memorialize our forefathers and mothers who suffered, being a victim is not a point of pride. I would say today that to fully realize what it means to be Armenian and to show your pride of being Armenian is a greater aspiration. To emphasize focus on the genocide, as admirable as that is to, in a way, let the Turks have the last word on who and what we are. Armenians have been around since the dawn of civilization. The earliest maps of the world always include Armenia. Like other nations and empires with long histories, our history is not easy to sum up. It is complex. It spans centuries, millennia even. And as a result, the Armenian people are no less complex. So to understand, we must have scholarship. Unless you want the history of the Armenian people to be nothing more than a history of carnage, you must commit to learning. Today, we are a diasporic people, which is to say that our population exists as much outside the borders of the Republic of Armenia as within them. It is a mistake to think, in fact, it is a false notion to believe that the millions of Armenians who live outside the Republic of Armenia are simply biding their time until they can return. I love Armenia. I visited Armenia, and it is an amazing country. I recommend that everyone here visit it at some point in their life. But I'm not waiting to move there because I live here in the United States. I am an American. Other Armenians live in Canada, France, Australia, Bulgaria, Russia, the list goes on and on. These diasporic Armenians make powerful positive contributions to their local communities while maintaining a deep and reverent pride in their heritage. In fact, the stronger these communities are, the better this is for those struggling to get by in the Republic of Armenia. Resources and general goodwill inevitably migrate back to the homeland. Instead of thinking of an inside and an outside of Armenia, I would prefer to think of a greater Armenia composed of a vast international network of communities, because that is the modern world in which we live, a world that is fluid, a world in which people cross borders while honoring their heritage. To think that the world is going to regress to a time where each nation is composed of a purely homogeneous population of their nationals is not realistic. What is pride? What is it worth? Well, as one generation follows the next, and as people with names that end in IAN or YAN continue to disperse all around the world, it is all the more important that we understand and manifest pride in the deepest way possible. We lose as a nation when we allow people to insist on restrictive definitions about what it means to be an Armenian. Some would say you are not an Armenian if you don't speak the language, or if you don't live in Armenia, or if you marry outside the community. I don't agree. Growing up around Boston, I grew up around so-called Italian kids and Irish kids. They were plenty proud of their heritage and willing to fight anyone who said a thing against it. I learned early on how great Italian cooking was, or what an Irish tenor was. People from these communities knew about their heritage, and they were proud of their heritage. Who doesn't know about river dance, or the famous Italians like Caruso or Marconi? Why shouldn't my children be just as proud of who we are? Why shouldn't my children understand that when you say you are Armenian, it doesn't just mean that you are a survivor of a genocide, but that you are a descendant of one of the longest lineages of civilized people in the world, of people who have made their mark on this good earth for thousands of years. Yes, thousands. Long before there were Turks and Mongols in the eastern part of what we now call Turkey, there were Armenians living there. Long before there were Christians in Northern Europe, Armenians were building monasteries. Today we number in the millions and continue to participate in the world civilization in profound and significant ways. We're not just chess masters, we are diplomats and scientists and doctors and great literati. We make headlines as sports stars and movie stars. The names Soroyan, Gorky, Agassi, Serge Tankian, Vartan Gregorian, these are people who have changed the world. Let us not be defined by tragedy. Let us be defined by achievement. Let us not be marked by blood, but by how we have made the world a better place. Of course, we must honor the memory of those who came before us, our grandparents and great-grandparents. We must protect their memory. And last year we did just that. We made sure the world understood that a great crime, one of the greatest the world has ever known, took place in the Ottoman Empire 100 years ago. Our efforts were successful, despite resistance by the Republic of Turkey and the timidity of our own leaders here in the United States. But what about the next generation of Armenians? What about assimilation? If there is a population of people around the world who call themselves Armenian, how does that number grow rather than shrink? Well, I think that if a nation is to survive, it must be inclusive of all those who are part of it. To understand your Armenian ancestry, you must call yourself an Armenian. How many people have I met over the years who proudly tell me that they have Native American blood in their veins? I'm 1/16th Cherokee. How do they know this? Why are they proud? Is it because they speak Cherokee or because they live on a reservation? No, it is because they know about the history and culture of their noble and great people. This must be our priority. This deep understanding of who we are in history, in the arts, in the world today, must be the first thing we think of when we ask the question, what is an Armenian? This is where NAASR comes in. About 10 years ago, I embarked on a journey. I had heard the story of Soghomon Tehlirian and wanted to write a movie based on his exploits. As I began my basic research, I soon learned that there was more to it than I understood. And what had begun as a fairly straightforward screenplay soon morphed into a serious scholarly work about a group of men who called themselves Nemesis. As I began to explore my topic, I found that I was pretty ignorant about all sorts of relevant facts in the story. First of all, I didn't know that much about World War I, or the history of the Middle East, or Britain, or Russia. In fact, I soon discovered I didn't know that much about the history of the Armenian genocide, or the history of the Armenians, despite Grandpa Mirgadich and my Sunday school lessons. I turned to scholars in the field to help me out. First and foremost was my old friend Aram Arkun, who is here tonight. Aram and I would meet every week or so and work our way through a translation he had done for me of Tehlirian's biography. Along the way, I could ask him any sort of question about Armenian or Turkish history. I learned all sorts of things about ancient and contemporary Armenian history, and the thing I learned right away was how vast and deep it was. I needed to do some studying on my own. And soon I found my way to NAASR and the dark, book-lined office of Mark Mamagonian. Like Aram, Mark could give me an informed angle on almost anything I had a question about, and he could point me in the direction of the right books and sources on almost any topic. The NAASR bookstore became an essential resource for my work. In time, Mark would also help me get in touch with authors and other experts who could help me dig deeper. Mark generously read my book as an unofficial fact checker, and when my book Operation Nemesis did come out in the spring of 2015, NAASR underwrote presentations both here in the Boston area and in California. I could not have finished my book without NAASR. Armenia and its political and cultural history is a huge area of study. It is in crying need of support for its scholars and institutions. And generous donors, such as you people here tonight, have laid the groundwork for study in the decades to come. Genocide studies are obviously a significant part of what needs to be done in the field of Armenian studies, and NAASR's efforts reflect that. But there is so much more to do. Armenia's ancient history encompassing the period of empire, its early Christian period, its glorious medieval history, and the centuries of the Ottomans, particularly the 19th century. These are all very, very important areas of study. Right now, today, archaeological digs are uncovering rich new finds in Armenia and Iran. Right now, today, brave scholars such as Taner Akçam, who is also here tonight, work diligently to sift through what is left of the Ottoman archives to find clues to what actually happened a century ago. Right now, important new work is being published about Armenians living and working within the Soviet Empire. The Great Armenian Tapestry features deep patterns that you may not think about much, but are significant. The roots of linguistics and modern architecture, the role of troubadours in the medieval period, the role of Armenians in the history of modern energy politics. All of this scholarship needs support. This scholarship is the foundation of a true and lasting and strong understanding of what it means to be Armenian. I am proud to be Armenian, and I am honored to be here tonight to support NAASR in their diligent and intense efforts to create a foundation for this scholarship. To simply repeat the folk tales about Armenia and Armenians, passed down from our loving grandparents, is not enough. Simply to focus on tragedy is not enough. In order to fully understand who we are as a people, who we ourselves are, in order that all Armenians can express a deep love and pride in all that is Armenian, we need to work so that we understand all of it. And that has been the wonderful accomplishment of NAASR, because this organization is dedicated to all of it. Thank you.